First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I thank very much Professor Rella. It's not my first time in India, but it is my first time in Chennai. I'm very pleased to be here and close to Pondichéry, who was French in the past, and I'm really impressed by the audience and the what have been done here in the past years. So my talk today is so I work in France in a city called Villejuif, the south of Paris, at the Hepatobiliary Center, which is belong to University Paris South, and also I'm head of research in CERM unit. So I will speak about renal impairment, which is a difficult issue. It is really known since a long time that renal impairment has a consequence after transplantation, and you can see the correlation between the survival post-transplantation and post-transplant renal function, and you can see also the impact of the issue of hemodialysis after transplantation on the survival of the patient. I mean, the couple kidney and liver is a well-known couple, and as you can know, there is a strong link between liver and kidney. And on the right, you can see the impact of decompensated cirrhosis on the occurrence of renal failure. And this is now well known. And indeed, you know that in the natural course of cirrhosis, when there is decompensation, you may have at a point occurrence of type 1 hepatorenal syndrome. And when there is refractory ascites, you may also observe type 2 hepatorenal syndrome. And this can occur frequently in patients with severe decompensated cirrhosis. But in fact, it is more complex than this. This table shows you that there are a lot of causes of acute and chronic renal failure in cirrhosis. So on the top, you can see the list of acute kidney disease. And of course, the most frequent is hepatorenal syndrome type 1, which is also the most severe. But you have always to also discriminate with pre-renal functional renal failure, but also acute tubular necrosis following hepatorenal syndrome or pre-renal failure, or drug-induced acute tubular necrosis and osmotic tubulopathy. So there are several causes where acute kidney injury is not due to hepatorenal syndrome. And also in cirrhotic, you have chronic kidney disease, diabetic glomerular necrosis, ischemic nephropathy, also some other causes of nephropathy, and also on a more chronic basis, hepatorenal syndrome type 2. Several criteria of acute kidney injury have been recently described, and according to the increase in serum creatinine from baseline or decrease in GFR from baseline, and you can see that you may measure this severity of acute kidney injury, AKI, according to the decrease of GFR by 25, 50, or 75%. Also, in cirrhotic, one of the most important messages is to not consider creatinine by itself, but rather creatinine clearance or GFR, which are in cirrhotic much more reliable than serum creatinine. And by this way, you may stage chronic liver disease, chronic kidney disease in liver disease patients, according to the GFR, and of course, severe decreased GFR occurred around below 30 milliliters per minute. You know that criteria for hepatorenal syndrome have been described, and you can see on this table the classical criteria for hepatorenal syndrome. I will not go into detail, but this is important because you know that this is from France, and this was really a big change in hepatorenal syndrome type 1. You know that before that study, most of the patients died within few days, as you can see, and the very important issue here is that part of the patient who can respond to terlipressin or other vasoconstrictor may survive several months. So the question is that, is it necessary to transplant patients when they are non-responder or when they are responder with more time to decide for transplantation? And this has been confirmed by a lot of studies, and this is a more recent study showing the impact of vasoconstrictor plus albumin on the survival of patients, and you can see survival of responder versus non-responder is completely different. Now we have some patients who have been transplanted while still on terlipressin. Some patients cannot be stopped from terlipressin, but this is really an important issue when to decide transplantation in these patients. I will just show you some few examples of chronic kidney disease in cirrhotic, and you know that in alcoholic cirrhosis, IgA glomerulopathy is possible, and to do the diagnosis, you have to consider the presence of hematuria, proteinuria, but of course, if there is hematuria, you have also to eliminate bladder cancer in this patient with cirrhosis. And renal biopsy is extremely important to evaluate the severity of mesangial IgA deposits. In HBV cirrhosis, it has been described some extramembranous glomerulopathy and with a very severe nephrotic syndrome, but in general there is a mild renal failure, no hematuria, no hypertension, and this is due to a complex between HBS antigen and HBS antibody in the kidney. And you know also that in Hep C cirrhosis, there are some cryoglobulinemia which can lead to membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis with nephrotic syndrome, hypertension, hematuria, and renal failure, or with glomerulopathy without nephrotic syndrome but with hypertension. And renal biopsy, once again, is important. But there are other causes which have been to be known, some liver glomerulosclerosis, autoimmune lupus-like lesions, and also in some patients with very severe hyperbilirubinemia, there are some deposits of pigments which can be deleterious to the kidney, and indeed this is important to know this because it is reversible. So an important issue in the management of the patient before liver transplantation is there a need for a renal biopsy. In fact, in general, in acute renal failure, and particularly in hepatorenal syndrome, there is no need for liver biopsy. But if you suspect acute kidney injury, not linked to hepatorenal syndrome, with severe anuria, more than 4, 5, 6 weeks, it is difficult to be sure that the renal failure is reversible after liver transplantation. And for this reason, renal biopsy can be necessary. In chronic kidney failure, if the patient is anuric on dialysis, there is no need for renal biopsy. There is a need for renal biopsy when GFR is decreased below 30 ml per minute or below 60 ml per minute in order to do the diagnosis and to do the prognosis of renal lesions. Renal biopsy can be done by the transjugular route as for the liver biopsy. So what are the indications of combined liver and kidney transplantation? Of course, in hepatorenal syndrome type 1 and 2, it is not indicated, but you have to consider that you may have post-transplant renal failure in this patient after surgery. In acute kidney injury, normally there is no indication for combined liver and kidney transplantation. But if you have a prolonged period of anuria, you have to be cautious and sometimes to perform a renal biopsy to know and to determine the diagnosis of renal failure. And as I told you, in patients with chronic renal failure, combined liver and kidney transplantation is indicated if GFR is below 30. It has to be discussed if GFR is below 60, and decision can be done on a combination of analysis of GFR, several exams, and kidney biopsy results. And you can see here, this is our experience in more than 100 patients who received combined liver and kidney transplantation. You can see that survival was extremely good, and you can see interestingly that the kidney rejection rate was extremely low in this patient who received kidney and liver from the same donor. The other aspect now is after transplantation, and this is a very famous paper published in the New England 10 years ago, which show the occurrence of renal failure in liver transplant recipient, as you can see here. And you can see that in this series, more than 25% of the patients develop severe kidney failure at 10 years. And this has been confirmed by several studies, which show here the rate of chronic kidney disease, and you can see that in some studies the rate is extremely high. And this is a study from France in more than 1,500 patients, which show the evolution of renal function after liver transplantation. And if you consider only GFR before transplantation, below 60, there were 11% of the patients before transplantation, 48% at 1 month post-transplantation, 58% at 5 years post-transplantation. So there is clearly and almost all patients have a GFR below 90. So you can see in this study the deterioration of renal function in liver transplant recipient. So I will not go into detail, but I mean there are several causes for this renal complication. One of the main causes are calcineurin inhibitors, and this is an issue. This is not the only one. You have also some other causes, such as diabetes, such as hepatitis C, such as other causes. And I will not go into detail regarding the mechanism of CNI toxicity after liver transplantation. So if you consider now renal failure post-liver transplantation, we may see in some patients the need for kidney transplantation, as you can see. Indeed, in the US, the number of patients on kidney transplant waiting list is increasing. This is in yellow the number of liver transplant patients who receive a kidney transplantation, and you can see that it was increasing in the last years. And this renal toxicity is on the rise. It's on the rise because in Europe we accept much more marginal donor. Also the pre-transplant MELD score is increased now. We have also more liver transplantation recipients who survive longer and who will develop renal dysfunction. So how to protect renal function? This requires some multifactorial approach. First, you have to optimize the perioperative management of your patient to avoid nephrotoxic drug, but also you can modulate on the immunosuppression. The first aspect is induction therapy after transplantation. And these are the results in the UNOS registry showing the impact of induction therapy with ATG or anti-CD25. And you can see that in fact there is either on patient and graft survival some benefit to use induction therapy after transplantation. And there is no difference in terms of survival according to the use of ATG or anti-CD25. The other aspect is to reduce or to delay or to withdraw or to avoid calcineurin inhibitor. You have some replacement options with MMF and mTOR inhibitor. So I will show you several studies. The first study was to combine tacrolimus with MMF, and in this study from France, in fact, the adjunction of MMF to tacrolimus was beneficial in terms of reduction of acute rejection and in terms of protection of the kidney. The other aspect is to delay the introduction of tacrolimus. And this is the RESPECT study which was conducted in Europe. There were 3 groups, one group tacrolimus plus corticosteroid, one group MMF plus tacrolimus plus corticosteroids, and one group with MMF, delayed introduction of tacrolimus at day 5, and induction therapy with daclizumab. And you can see that the change in eGFR at 1 year was lower in the delayed tacrolimus group, while there was no difference in biopsy-proven acute rejection. So this is an example of a success story, but in fact this has not been shown in all studies as shown here in this assessment of renal function with delayed tacrolimus introduction. You can see there was no change here. There are also in this study and the other aspect is to use mTOR inhibitor and particularly everolimus. I will show you the results of this study. Patients receive after liver transplantation 1 month of treatment with tacrolimus, corticosteroids plus MMF. They were randomized to receive either tacrolimus and steroid or everolimus and reduced tacrolimus, or discontinuation of tacrolimus, and then everolimus was introduced. This group was stopped due to too high rate of acute rejection, and this group should not be used. So in fact the study was conducted on these 2 remaining groups, classical group tacrolimus plus steroid and everolimus reduced tac. So in this study, there was a beneficial effect of using everolimus and tacrolimus versus classical tacrolimus in terms of reduced rate of rejection, no more graft loss or death. And you can see also that the eGFR was better in the group with everolimus and reduced tac here than in the group with classical tacrolimus plus steroids. So, this is another study which shows the comparison of after 4 weeks of induction therapy here plus CNI plus steroid, introduction of everolimus followed by CNI elimination versus continuation of CNI regimen. This has been published last year. And you can see that there was no difference in terms of death, graft loss, biopsy-proven acute rejection in this study, but there was some benefit on the renal function in the everolimus group. So the other aspect is to consider the protection of the kidney at midterm. So on this figure you can see what can be proposed. After liver transplantation, if a patient has no renal injury in the midterm, the patient can be followed closely, and you may consider modification of the strategy if mild to moderate renal injury occurred. If the patient has an early renal injury, he will probably evolve to moderate renal injury or severe renal injury, and you have to consider CNI minimization plus mTOR inhibitors, or mTOR inhibitors plus CNI withdrawal plus mycophenolate at long term. So all this strategy has to be evaluated in the future in the trials, in randomized trials, because I mean there is no clear guidelines yet, but I mean there is one guideline, is to try for the long term to protect the kidney function of our patient. So to conclude, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, first, it is extremely important to well evaluate the renal function prior to transplantation. The help of a nephrologist is always helpful. It is important to differentiate hepatorenal syndrome and functional renal failure from chronic renal failure, and you have to use creatinine clearance, GFR, US examination of the kidney, urine analysis, proteinuria, hematuria, and eventually transjugular renal biopsy. Pre-transplant management is extremely important. Correction of dehydration, prevention and treatment of HRS type 1, treatment of HRS type 2, and if there is a chronic renal failure, consider liver and kidney transplantation. And finally, you have to consider to manage well your patient during the surgery, so to try to protect the kidney, to avoid VCI clamping, to manage, to have a good hemodynamic management during surgery, and clearly to, in the post-transplant management, to avoid overdosing on CNI, to use eventually some strategy of induction immunosuppression with delayed CNI introduction, and also to see in the future if the strategy to introduce mTOR after 1 month is a good strategy, either alone with mycophenolate or either with a reduced CNI, and this is, I think, one of the important issues in the future. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, sir. It was excellent talk. I have few questions. In day-to-day practice, liver cirrhosis, whenever the patient comes to us with a renal dysfunction, the elevation of the serum creatinine in cirrhotic patients,
Yes.
either it could be the diuretic induced, or sometimes the patient have associated sepsis, or already the patient have diabetic background. Otherwise, as you mentioned, based on the etiology related, either A, alcohol causing IgA nephropathy, B, C virus causing the glomerulonephritis. So that time, how we are very sure the elevation of the renal parameter, the creatinine, is due to purely HRS type 1 or type 2. So what the book described earlier, it is a functional disorder. There should not be anatomic changes, but in practice, it's a complex. So, what is your opinion?
No, I agree. I mean, this is what I say. We were in the process to think that, as I said, cirrhotic patients, they are exposed to hepatorenal syndrome type 1 or type 2, and hepatorenal syndrome type 1 or type 2 should be reversible after liver transplantation since it is purely functional. The point is that it is not true. It is not true because first, in a patient with hepatorenal syndrome type 1, they have frequently associated renal dysfunction due to sepsis, due to nephrotoxic drug, and sometimes it will not be reversible because it's too severe, and this is a difficulty. The second point is that indeed the cirrhotic patient have, as you said, diabetes or IgA nephropathy or other cause of chronic renal dysfunction which can be overexpressed in patients with decompensated cirrhosis. So I mean, and this is why I think this is important to have a multidisciplinary approach with a nephrologist who knows the cirrhotic patient. And also I think this is what we are doing. First, to see the history of the patient. Second, to do really urinary analysis, a good evaluation of renal function using GFR and not creatinine. And finally, to use renal biopsy in the patient when you are not sure, either for the diagnosis and for the prognosis. And this is why we perform frequently pre-transplant renal biopsy when we have these difficulties.
If the patient is not tolerating terlipressin, because of the terlipressin, if the patient is getting either diarrhea or abdominal cramp, so that time what you will suggest to us? What is the alternative? Yeah.
Of course, if the tolerance is not good, you have to try to reduce terlipressin, but I mean, there is, you may see similar effect with noradrenaline. The point is that the risk for the cardiovascular risk is almost the same. So I mean, all these drugs are vasoconstrictors, so I mean at a point, they are not always well supported. What you have to do is to reduce the dose, but if the patient is not well, if it is really not well supported and if you have to stop, in some patients indeed anuria can come again, and this is a problem.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, Vivek Patak, nephrologist. Now, there are certain problems we face with your patients. Number one, creatinine does not rise because of reduced muscle mass.
Yeah.
Urea does not rise because of decreased conversion in liver.
Yeah.
EGFR studies of the West do not exactly apply to our patients, because to start with, our patients are already class 1 or class 2. When we investigate with nuclear scan, all our potential donors, young, healthy, with no urine abnormality, no non-diabetic, non-hypertensives, what we see GFR is around 80 to 90 to start with. Perhaps our height and weight is already 25% less. To start with, we don't have 110, 120. So if we go by the Western classification, apply exactly to India, to start with, we'll all be having CKD class 1. And at 75, 80 years of age, all be CKD class 2. So when a donor gives kidney in India, he's already at a GFR of 40, 35 to 40 or 45. Number 3, now when we do kidney transplants in India, my program is all steroid free for 8 years. 800 patients, 2,300 protocol biopsies at 1 year and 5 years, which I have done for ABO incompatible kidney transplant, which I am doing regularly. So when you look at the kidney biopsies, protocol biopsies, those patients who are otherwise normal, I find kidney histology nearly normal at 75% at 5 years. Some patients who show tubular atrophy, interstitial fibrosis could be because of tacrolimus toxicity, but they are still doing well. When you look at Nankivell's published paper, which I have gone through, which became very famous in the world because it showed a lot of CMRI toxicity in those patients, it was from Australia, at 8 and 10 years. But the fact remains those patients were still doing well at 10 years, 70%. My own patient survival at 10 years is 77%. So in spite of toxicity, they do well. So sometimes we feel tacrolimus elimination is perhaps transplant elimination. But the problems of everolimus in India, I have had around 80-85 patients on everolimus. I had not brought the data with me. Significant problems with proteinuria, refractory edema, sometimes leading to anasarca, severe anemia, and the dose recommended, a very high dose, most of the patients cannot afford, becomes very expensive. Even at lower doses, these side effects of anemia, edema, and mouth ulcers, which allow us to discontinue therapy in majority of patients. So those patients who could definitely have CNA toxicity in our program, we reduce the dose of tacrolimus and add everolimus as second line, not the first line agent. Keep tacrolimus around 3 to 4 and 3 to 4 of everolimus. That works out. Still in many patients I had to discontinue the treatment. Now last word about the hepatitis C disease. Now those patients with liver and kidney injury together, I am not talking of hepatorenal right now, those patients who come with a picture of glomerulonephritis and we find hepatitis C, it's an important thing to diagnose. This glomerulonephritis is because of hepatitis C, because it can respond well to injection rituximab. So in any patient with a sudden onset of renal failure and glomerulonephritis, it is important that we do HCV RNA if it is HCV antibodies positive in the unsuspected population, because these patients do well. Now hepatorenal syndrome, when they...
I think we're deviating here. A lot of what you're talking about is in renal transplantation. I don't want to deviate too much. You've got a lot of points there. I'm sorry. What I want to summarize, we're running out of time. I want Professor J. Samil, there are 3 issues he talked about. I mean, this is about perioperative care of a liver transplant patient. And you did address the long-term consequences of renal impairment. All I want you to tell the audience is, the first message for the audience is, perioperative dialysis renal impairment significantly affects survival. And I learned this lesson 20 years ago in the pediatric patients when we looked at survival after transplantation in the early days, about 15 years ago. Not one child who had perioperative dialysis survived. So I want people to take a message that renal impairment and dialysis perioperatively significantly affect survival. I want you to ask one question which we commonly see. A patient is coming for transplantation. This is all about a patient who is coming for transplantation with a problem. What sort of immunosuppression that you do in your patient, say a patient with a creatinine of 2 preoperatively on the day of the operation, and when will you start your CNI? And I think that's the only message, the last message from you. Thank you.
Okay. In my group, what we are doing, in patients with almost normal renal function, we are doing a triple immunosuppression with corticosteroid, tacrolimus, or less often cyclosporine, plus mycophenolate. Okay, and we try to avoid overdosing of tacrolimus because, as you know, most of the renal chronic dysfunction are due to acute toxicity in the first months. But in patients with decreased GFR and in patients with post-transplant renal failure, we always use an induction therapy. So we use corticosteroid induction therapy for 5 days with anti-CD25, and then we introduce at day 5 or 6 tacrolimus or CNI. So I mean, in patients with normal renal function, we use CNI plus corticosteroid plus mycophenolate to avoid overuse of CNI. And in patients with post-transplant renal failure or pre-transplant renal failure, we always delay the introduction of CNI at day 5 or 6, and we use induction therapy for the first 5 days with mycophenolate, anti-CD25, and corticosteroid.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Samuel, for a wonderful talk, and the discussion followed.